Keanu Reeves had never imagined his day would take such an unexpected turn. He had just been walking down the street, lost in thought, when a wedding procession caught his attention. The bright decorations, the elegant bride, and the crowd of joyful guests, it was all so picturesque. But something felt off. There was a tension in the air, a feeling that something wasn't quite right, and Keanu couldn't ignore it. As the ceremony proceeded, Keanu stood at the back, observing. The bride, radiant in her white gown, held the arm of a man who seemed distant. His face was expressionless, almost cold. It was as if he were going through the motions, but not truly present. The guests whispered to each other, and Keanu, being the empathetic person he was, couldn't shake the feeling that this wedding wasn't just a celebration, it was a performance. He didn't know what came over him, but before he could stop himself, Keanu made his way to the front of the ceremony. The music stopped. The crowd fell silent, staring at him in shock. He was known for his privacy, his low-key lifestyle, so why was he here, interrupting such a significant moment? The groom's face twisted with confusion. "What are you doing here?" he asked sharply. Keanu took a deep breath. "I couldn't just stand there and watch this happen," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the silence. "You're making a mistake. Both of you are." The guest gasped. The bride's face flushed red, her eyes darting around nervously. The groom, now visibly agitated, stepped forward. "This is none of your business, Keanu." But Keanu wasn't finished. "It's about to be," he replied, his gaze never leaving the groom's. "I know you've been pretending, wearing a mask for the world to see, but I see through it. You've been pressured into this. You're not doing this because you love her. You're doing it because it's what everyone expects." The room was filled with tension, and the couple's faces showed an uncomfortable mix of guilt and confusion. Keanu turned to the bride. "And you think this will solve all your problems. But it won't. It's just a way to hide from the real issues you're facing." The bride's eyes welled with tears, and for a moment, the facade of the perfect couple crumbled. The guests murmured among themselves, some uncertain, others angry. Was Keanu right? Was this really just a performance? The groom, now red with rage, grabbed Keanu by the arm. "You don't know anything about us. This is our life, our decision." Keanu looked him in the eye, calm but resolute. "Then prove it. Don't do what's expected of you. Do what's right for both of you. Stop living for the approval of others." Silence hung in the air. The groom released Keanu's arm, his anger still boiling beneath the surface. But something had shifted. The bride stood there, her hands trembling as she glanced between Keanu and her soon-to-be husband. The truth had been exposed in front of everyone, and the weight of that truth was undeniable. As Keanu turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of the guests' faces. Some were uncomfortable, some were angry, and some seemed relieved, as if they too had been waiting for someone to say what they had been too afraid to. What Keanu had done wasn't just about the wedding. It was about the courage to face the uncomfortable truths, the things that everyone else had been too scared to confront. Just before he stepped out the door, he paused. "Don't settle for the life everyone else wants for you," he said softly, his voice carrying a quiet intensity. "You have the power to change it." And with that, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving the couple and everyone in that room standing in the aftermath of his words. The questions lingered in the air. Would they call off the wedding? Would they face the truth and make the difficult decisions that lay ahead? Keanu had interrupted the ceremony, but what he had left behind was a powerful, unsettling silence, one that would resonate far beyond that room. The story was just beginning. The next morning, the headlines were filled with the unexpected interruption. "Keanu Reeves shocks wedding guests," one headline read. "Celebrity crashes wedding to expose hidden truths," said another. People were buzzing, discussing the unusual moment. But for the bride and groom, it wasn't just news. It was the beginning of something far more complicated. The bride, Emma, woke up with a heavy heart. The words Keanu had spoken kept replaying in her mind. "You're doing this because it's what everyone expects." She stared at the ceiling, the truth sinking in. For years, she had been caught in a whirlwind of expectations. Her family's, her friends, society's. She had grown up believing that love would come after marriage, that the perfect life would fall into place once she wore the white dress. But Keanu's words had shattered that illusion. Sitting across from her in the living room was Alex, her soon-to-be husband. He was scrolling through his phone, seemingly unaffected by what had happened the day before. He looked at Emma, his face blank. "Are we really going to let some random guy dictate our lives?" he asked, clearly annoyed. But Emma couldn't look away from the truth Keanu had laid bare. She had always known there was something missing, something deeper in their relationship that neither of them had been brave enough to confront. Alex wasn't the man she thought he was, and she wasn't the woman he thought she was. The love between them, if it had ever existed, was buried beneath the weight of obligation and fear. "I don't know," Emma whispered. "I don't think we should go through with this." Alex's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying? Are you really going to listen to him? He doesn't know anything about us." But Emma wasn't listening to Alex anymore. She was listening to herself for the first time in years. She stood up abruptly, her heart pounding in her chest. "I need time. I need space to figure this out." Alex stood up as well, frustration etched on his face. "You're going to ruin everything, Emma. We've already put so much into this wedding. People are expecting us to follow through." His voice was rising, but Emma wasn't scared. She wasn't going to back down. The tension between them was palpable. Emma could feel the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders, the pressure of family, friends, and society telling her what was right. But Keanu's interruption had given her the courage to see that her happiness wasn't something to be sacrificed for anyone else. Meanwhile, Keanu was lying low. He had seen the backlash on social media, the angry messages, the confused reactions. But there were also the other messages, the ones of gratitude. He had no regrets about his decision, but he knew that the consequences of his actions weren't over. He had ignited something, and it wasn't just about Emma and Alex. It was about everyone who had ever felt trapped by expectations, who had ever wondered if they were truly living their own life, or just playing a part in someone else's script. Keanu didn't seek fame or validation, but the wave he had caused was undeniable. People had started reaching out to him, people who had been on the brink of making life-altering decisions, people who had been too scared to confront the truth. Keanu wasn't a hero, but he had unknowingly become a symbol of rebellion against societal norms. As he sat in his apartment, reflecting on the events, he thought about the impact of his actions. Emma and Alex were just the beginning. There were so many others out there, struggling with the same fears, the same doubts. What if, by simply being honest and standing up for what was right, he could inspire them to break free from their chains? That night, Keanu received a call from Emma. Her voice was shaky but determined. "Keanu, I don't know what to do. You were right, and now I'm scared of what will happen next." Keanu listened quietly, understanding the weight of her words. "The truth is never easy," he said softly, "but it's the only way to move forward." Emma paused. "What if I lose everything? What if I lose Alex, my family, my friends?" Keanu's voice was steady. "What if you gain yourself in the process? What if you finally start living the life you deserve?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening, but it wasn't a silence of defeat. It was the silence of someone on the verge of making a choice that would change everything. And with that, the real journey began. For Emma, for Alex, for Keanu. For all of them, the wedding ceremony was never just about a union between two people. It was about the courage to face the truth, the courage to live authentically, and the courage to embrace the unknown. The world would watch, and the twists were just beginning. Days passed, and the ripple effect of Keanu's actions continued to reverberate throughout the lives of everyone involved. The wedding that was supposed to mark a new chapter for Emma and Alex now hung in the balance, with both of them caught in an emotional whirlwind that neither could control. Emma, after her conversation with Keanu, had begun to see things more clearly. The weight of expectations from her family and friends had been heavy on her for as long as she could remember, and for the first time, she was considering the possibility that she didn't have to follow the script laid out for her. She spent hours reflecting, feeling the rawness of her emotions, the fear of losing everything she had known, and the exhilarating freedom that came with the idea of choosing her own path. But the more Emma thought about it, the more the doubt crept in. She had always relied on Alex, on their relationship, on the comfort of knowing what was expected of her. But was that truly love? Or was it just the safe option? She couldn't shake the feeling that she had been living for others, not for herself. Meanwhile, Alex, struggling with his own emotions, began to feel the weight of the situation. Emma's sudden uncertainty had thrown him off balance. For years, they had lived their lives according to a plan that he had been happy with, or so he had told himself. But now, with Keanu's words echoing in his mind, he couldn't help but question everything. Was he really ready to marry Emma? Did he love her the way he thought he did? Or had he simply become too comfortable in their shared existence? Late one night, Alex sat in the dimly lit kitchen of their shared apartment, staring at the empty glass in front of him. He had tried to call Emma several times, but she hadn't picked up. He knew she was torn, but he couldn't bring himself to face the truth. He had always seen himself as a provider, as someone who had his life figured out, but now it all felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Emma. "I need to talk to you." That simple message sent a wave of anxiety through him. He knew this was coming. The conversation they had been avoiding for so long was about to unfold, and nothing would ever be the same after it. The next morning, Emma and Alex met at a quiet cafe. The air between them was thick with tension, but neither of them knew where to begin. Emma was the first to speak. "Alex, I've been thinking a lot. About everything. About us." Alex looked at her, his face unreadable. "What are you saying, Emma? You can't just change your mind like this. We've been planning this wedding for months. Our families are involved. You can't just throw it all away." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't easy, but she had to say it. "I can't go through with it, Alex. Not if it means staying in a life that isn't truly mine. I've been living for everyone else. Our families, our friends, society, but not for me." Alex's face contorted with anger and frustration. "So what? You're just going to walk away from everything? You don't think about the consequences, do you? This is real life, Emma. You don't get to just pick and choose when it's convenient for you." The words stung, but Emma stood her ground. "I've spent my whole life trying to meet everyone's expectations. I've ignored my own voice for too long. I can't marry you, Alex, if I'm not being true to myself." There was a long silence. The weight of her words hung in the air, and for the first time, Alex saw her. Not as his fiancée, not as someone who would simply fit into his life, but as a person, struggling with her own fears and desires. He didn't want to let go of the future they had built together, but deep down he knew she was right. He had been too focused on what he wanted, what he thought was best, and not enough on what Emma needed. "Are you sure about this?" Alex asked quietly, his voice softened by the realization that he couldn't force her to stay. Emma nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what will happen next, but I know this isn't the life I want." Keanu's words echoed in her mind, and she felt a surge of determination. For the first time in her life, she was choosing her own path. It was terrifying, but it was also freeing. As the conversation continued, it became clear that their relationship, like the wedding they had planned, wasn't as solid as they had once believed. Their future together was uncertain, but Emma knew that whatever happened next, it was her choice. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her life anymore. But the world around them didn't understand. They were being watched by friends, family, and strangers alike. The gossip was relentless. Emma was labeled selfish by some, brave by others. The pressure of being judged weighed heavily on her shoulders, but she refused to let it control her. Keanu, still following the fallout from the wedding, received another unexpected call, this time from Alex. He hadn't expected this. Alex's voice was shaky as he spoke. "Keanu, I don't know what to do anymore. Emma, she's changed, and I don't know if I can change with her. I feel like I'm losing everything." Keanu, ever the voice of reason, paused before replying. "You don't have to lose yourself in the process, Alex. This isn't about winning or losing. It's about finding the truth in your own heart. If you're meant to be with Emma, you'll have to start by being honest with yourself first." The conversation ended with no clear resolution, but Keanu's words hung in the air, both a challenge and an invitation to face the uncomfortable truths of their lives. The storm wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Days turned into weeks, and the tensions surrounding Emma and Alex's situation only deepened. The media frenzy surrounding Keanu's unexpected intervention at their wedding had only intensified, with new articles surfacing daily, dissecting every moment of the ceremony and its aftermath. Emma couldn't escape the constant scrutiny. Her life, her choices, were now the subject of public discussion. But as the weight of external judgment bore down on her, Emma found herself growing stronger. The first few days after her conversation with Alex had been brutal. Sleepless nights, endless questioning, and the crushing fear of making the wrong decision. Yet as time passed, she began to realize something profound. For the first time, she was living for herself, not for anyone else. In the weeks following, Emma distanced herself from the life she had known. She moved out of the apartment she had shared with Alex into a small, quiet place on the edge of town. The solitude gave her the space she needed to reflect and grow. She started to find peace in the little things, the comfort of a good book, the freedom to take walks without worrying about meeting someone's expectations, the joy of rediscovering who she was before the weight of other people's dreams had shaped her identity. Meanwhile, Alex struggled. The reality of losing Emma hit him hard, but it was his own internal conflict that weighed the heaviest. The life they had built, the plans they had made, it all felt like a distant dream now, shattered beyond repair. His family didn't understand, and neither did his friends. They all thought Emma had betrayed him, that she had given up on their future for no good reason. But deep down, Alex knew that Emma hadn't abandoned him. She had simply chosen to live authentically, and that was something he had never truly understood until now. He couldn't shake the feeling that the life he had envisioned for himself, one of certainty, of social validation, of conforming to the expectations placed on him, was slipping away. He had always believed in the idea of stability, of doing what was right, but now that the illusion had crumbled, he found himself questioning everything. Keanu, in his own way, was also reflecting on the consequences of his actions. He had never intended to become a symbol of revolution or defiance. He had simply spoken the truth when he saw it. Yet as time passed, he began to understand the power of what he had done. People were coming to him, sharing their stories of struggle and repression, seeking advice, or simply looking for someone who would listen. He had sparked something bigger than a wedding interruption. It was a movement of sorts, a call for people to stop living in fear, to confront their own truths, and to dare to live authentically. One afternoon, Keanu sat in his office, a quiet moment of reflection as he thought about the whirlwind his life had become. His phone buzzed, pulling him back to reality. It was a message from Emma. "Can we meet? I need to talk." Keanu agreed, knowing this moment was inevitable. He had been waiting for it, knowing that the story he had unwittingly helped set in motion was far from over. When they met at a small cafe in the city, Emma looked different. The weight that had been on her shoulders seemed lighter, her eyes clearer. "Keanu," she began, her voice steady. "I'm not sure where I'm headed, but I know one thing. I've never felt more alive. I'm finally facing the truth, and I'm no longer afraid to choose what's right for me." Keanu smiled softly. "I'm proud of you, Emma. It's not an easy road, but it's yours to walk, and I think you're stronger than you know." But Emma's expression softened, and she leaned forward. "Keanu, I need to ask you something. All this, everything that's happened, was it worth it? Was it worth the chaos? The uncertainty? Did you know this would happen?" Keanu looked at her, a mix of contemplation and understanding in his eyes. "I didn't know it would happen, but I believed in it. I believed in the truth. Sometimes we have to break things down before we can rebuild them. And in the process, we might lose some things, but we also gain something much more valuable." Emma nodded, a tear escaping down her cheek. "I get it now. I've been living for everyone else, and I've forgotten who I am. I can't keep doing that." The conversation continued, but there was an undeniable shift between them. Emma wasn't just seeking answers anymore. She was finding them within herself. The path ahead was still uncertain, and the consequences of their actions would continue to unfold. But for Emma, the choice was clear. She was no longer afraid to live on her own terms. As Keanu left the cafe, he reflected on the lives he had touched, the stories that were unfolding around him, and the people who were now beginning to question their own truths. He wasn't a savior, he thought. He had just given a small push to a larger movement, and sometimes that's all it takes to change the world, one truth at a time. Emma and Alex, though their paths had diverged, both had started their journeys toward authenticity. The wedding, the plans, the expectations, they were all gone, replaced by the undeniable realization that the most important thing was to live a life that was true to themselves. In the end, the story wasn't just about a wedding that never happened. It was about the courage to break free from the chains of societal norms, to stand up for what was right, and to embrace the unknown with open arms. Keanu, in his own quiet way, had shown them that sometimes the greatest act of love is not the one we give to others, but the one we give to ourselves.